And this was a great moment where I was like, let's turn the tables on them and try to catch these bastards, right? There are hackers who tried to do something a little different recently, which was they actually started contacting our customer support agents, put out this $20 million bounty. By the way, when Osama bin Laden took down the towers, I think the US government put out a $25 million bounty for information on him. So this was like a pretty substantial bounty, right? There are hackers who tried to do something a little different recently, which was they actually started contacting our customer support agents and trying to bribe them to turn over customer information. Now, our customer support agents don't have access. They can't like move your money, right? But they can turn over things like, people's personal information, like their name, address, maybe their balance or something like that, because they're looking at that to try to help customers with their problem. And, we started getting customer support agents get offered like 250 grand bribes for some of these things, which is crazy, right? And unfortunately, especially in some of our facilities we operate overseas on this, if you ask 1,000 people, you offer 1,000 people 250K to turn over some information like that, they're going to find one or two bad apples. And so that's what started happening. Some of these agents were actually, because they're not allowed to use their own computer. They're not allowed. It's a lockdown system. They're not even allowed to bring in their own phone. They have to use like a work phone. But what some of these folks started doing was smuggling in a personal phone and taking photos of the screen with some of the customer information and giving it to these attackers. And then the attackers would call up our customers and say, hey, this is Coinbase support. Like, are you blah, 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 who lives at this address? And it would create credibility. And they would try to tell them, hey, your account has been compromised. Like, you need to move your funds immediately. And like, can you send it to this address? And sort of trick people into sending their funds to the attacker. So we noticed that this was happening. And by the way, we refunded the customers who were affected by this, so none of them had any loss. So the attacker who had gotten this information, the information they had gotten was starting to get less and less useful because we were cracking down on it and hardening our systems. There's a whole bunch of ways we can do that, by the way. But what happened is they basically, once the information started to be less useful, they sent us a ransom demand, and they said, hey, we're going to leak all this customer information, send it to journalists, and if you don't pay us $20 million. So we kind of got together as a team, our chief security officer, and these guys are great, been working on this stuff for a long time. And they kind of said, look, we shouldn't pay the ransom because, maybe they'll hold off releasing the information for a few months, but guess what always happens? They come back and demand more, like 3 months later, 6 months later. And how good are we going to feel if we give $20 million to these criminals and it just funds their next attack and just emboldens them, right? And so we came up with this idea in the room. Why don't we flip the ransom on them? We'll put out a $20 million bounty for any information leading to their arrest and conviction. And this was kind of a controversial idea in the in the security community. A lot of people later told me like, oh, we'd always wanted to do that, but we were kind of afraid to do it. And this was a great moment where I was like, let's turn the tables on them and try to catch these bastards, right? So that's exactly what we did. We put out this $20 million bounty. By the way, when Osama bin Laden took down the towers, I think the US government put out a $25 million bounty for information on him. So this was like a pretty substantial bounty, right? And it's one of the, you heard that expression, like there's no honor amongst thieves. So all these hackers started sending in tips. Some of them were regular people, but others were actually other threat actors. And they're like, guess what? I know the guy who did that attack, because they have some beef with this guy or whatever. We got like 5,000 tips that came into this tip line because people wanted $20 million, right? And, maybe like a couple hundred of those were like really solid leads. We had a team start to work down the list. We don't have anything like to announce today on it, but I think we're making really good progress towards a couple arrests here. And long story short is it's not just like one person involved. Like it's as with everything, it's more complicated, but we've gotten to build some really good relationships with law enforcement, and it's going to feel really good to catch some bad guys.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I can't wait till you get them.
Yeah.
That's good thinking. Great thinking. Let's talk about I know you were instrumental in the Genius Act, correct?
Yeah.
What is that?
The Genius Act is a piece of legislation that helps stablecoins be allowed to be used in the United States. Stablecoins are these digital dollars. It allows payments to happen quickly and cheaply anywhere in the world with the US dollar. I mentioned some of these other payment methods, right? Like credit cards, 2 to 3% fee every time the merchant swipes your card. Like wire transfers, they work internationally, but they cost like $50. They're kind of slow. There's lots of different payment methods, but none of them are like fast, cheap, and global, right? And so stablecoins are the only ones that check that box. That you can send them anywhere in the world for under 1 cent in 1 second or less.
Wow.
So USDC is, I think the biggest legitimate one that's out there, and all the dollar stablecoins are backed by U.S. Treasuries, which means that we can actually pay like 4.5% to people holding these things, which I mentioned earlier you can't really get on your checking account or savings account. So anyway, the Genius Act, it took a lot of work by members of Congress and Senate. A bunch of companies, including us, have been kind of advocating for this legislation, and it just creates like clear rules around how these things can be issued and used. And now that there's clear legislation that just got passed last Friday, I was at the White House for the signing ceremony with President Trump. I think you're going to see more and more businesses start to accept stablecoins. It just saves them money. Like if you're, I don't know, as an average consumer, you might think, 2 to 3% fee, that's not that much. I don't pay it. The merchant pays it. But if you're like a grocery store or something, your margin might be like only 5%, right? So if you have to pay 2 to 3% to the credit card companies and your margin's 5%, that's like a huge chunk of your profit margin, right? Your margin. So anyway, I think it's just another way that crypto is updating the financial system, and the Stablecoin Act is a huge first step, this Genius Act. The other big piece of legislation we need to get done is called the Clarity Act, which is about the other kinds of crypto assets that are not stablecoins, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and it's kind of helping determine which of these are commodities or securities. This is the lack of clarity that got weaponized by Gary Gensler and Elizabeth Warren in the prior administration. If we have laws passed that make it clear how these things are regulated, they can't come attack it and try to kill it again in the future.
Makes sense. I mean, I think I read that the Federal Reserve put Bitcoin, Cardano, Ethereum, XRP. The Federal Reserve is going to hold some. What does that mean for us?
Yeah, well, President Trump passed this executive order creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve and then a crypto asset stockpile to hold some of these other ones as well. A lot of people don't know, but the U.S. actually holds strategic reserves of a number of different assets. So gold is probably the most famous one, but there's a bunch of other ones that they hold. Like there's an oil strategic reserve. There's like palladium. I think there's a bunch of like rare minerals, and so it's kind of a historic step where the United States government is saying, actually, we think Bitcoin is another strategic asset which should be held by the U.S. government. This would have been unthinkable, by the way, like 5 years ago, where the government was so skeptical of it. And now, like the United States government is holding a stockpile of these Bitcoin assets. So that was a huge moment. It kind of, by the way, now that the U.S. is doing this, I think like the rest of the G20 countries and central banks are all starting to look at this. It just kind of instantly legitimized it. And President Trump, to his credit, he said he wants to be the first crypto president in the United States and certainly in the world. Like he's all in on this. He's like, America has to lead here. This is a technology to update the financial system and become a financial center of the world.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.